Welcome to today's Daily Walk in Worship, where we're getting deeper into the Song of Songs, the greatest song of all, the Song of Love. The wisdom literature is directing us into a deep place where we can understand all things because we have love all around us and love inside of us, and somehow that supersedes every other kind of knowledge. We're in chapter 1. I'm going to be reading verses 9 to 11. The king is talking. He says, "I have compared you, O my love, to a company of horses harnessed to one of the chariots of Pharaoh. And your cheeks are beautiful with earrings, and your neck with strings of jewels, and we will make you chains of gold studded with silver." And for the first time, the king calls the Shulamite my love, and it occurs in the context of correction. The king is bringing some adjustment to his bride. There's nothing condemnatory here. It's loving correction, bringing her attention to certain weaknesses or a proclivity, something that is estranged within her nature. And he does so with the compelling reassurance of his love, followed by a positive solution. The comparison to a company of horses is more correctly translated, "I compare you to my mare harnessed to Pharaoh's chariot." Horses speak of strength and the pride of this world system, of a substitute power, of earthly potential and capability. So think about that in relation to how you operate. Do you live out of natural energy, or do you live out of spiritual energy? Because that is what this passage is talking about. In those days, the horse was a symbol of speed, and we still speak about a car having horsepower. And the Shulamite is running swiftly, running after the king, but her swift movement has an old creation and not a new creation source. So it is that often in our zeal for God, we find ourselves exhausted because we have been driving under our own natural energy instead of Zoe, or the life of God's Spirit. If ever you find your passion for the things of God waning, you can be sure that you have been operating out of natural energy that is masquerading as spiritual fervor. It'll be couched in all kinds of religious language and will be aimed in spiritual directions, but you will be operating out of natural, human, fleshly fire. Spirit always gives birth to spirit, and flesh always gives birth to flesh. And whenever you're doing things for God, you can discover the source of your desire by the fruit that is born from your labor. If you are bearing spiritual fruit, then the origin of that is of a spiritual nature. But if you're bearing fruit that won't last, or fruit that has flesh attached to it in some kind of way, or manifests in fleshly outbreaks, then the origin would have had a flesh origin, would have been a fleshly source from where you are drawing. Hey, think about that. Should your intentions be godly, then your activity will be enervating. You'll end up with more energy. Should you be self-serving, however, you'll feel drained. A dependence upon the attitudes and the motives of the world system will jeopardize our grace-oriented relationship with God. So that's what happens when we do things in church or in our personal life that have been setting ourselves up for some kind of self-promotion or self-advancement, and we'll end up drained instead of energized. When our worship services are hyped up, you'll end up draining the life out of people instead of energizing them. They'll have the energy while you're whooping up a storm, but they'll go home and feel as though they have no strength to face the week. And the Shulamite provides us with a picture of the church charging ahead with ungodly drive. God's work must be done in God's way. Mixed motives result in a muddled-up church, a mixture of hot and cold that causes a lukewarm reaction. This Laodicean characteristic may not reveal itself for quite some time, yet demise is inevitable. Never fool yourself into thinking that we can pull off God's work through carnal means. Just because it works does not assure us that it has God's validation. A church can be advancing today, but when it operates flesh-oriented programs out of expediency, it is in fact committing a slow spiritual suicide. The Psalms say, "Be not as the horse or the mule, which have no understanding." Wise up. Wise up. Here in this book of love, God is calling for us to wise up and to live out of the love and the life of God, out of the Spirit of God, out of our newly created nature in Christ. Now, living out of the flesh whilst wanting to do godly things is the Shulamite's problem. It is your problem. It is my problem. It's all our problem. Wanting to do things for Jesus, but having grown up operating out of the flesh creates the problem. And graciously, the king does not point out the Shulamite's fault without providing her with the solution to her dilemma. And he draws attention to her cheeks. The cheek represents or presents to us a line of natural beauty. And he says that her cheeks are beautiful. And then he draws attention to her neck and then her head, and he says they are beautiful with rows of jewels. Now the cheek represents a line of natural beauty. It is a line of elegance, but it also discloses the outer representation of our interior emotion. So when we laugh, our cheek will rise. When we're sad or when we're ill, our cheeks will sag. The neck also, on the one hand, portrays elegance, like the cheek, but on the other, the neck characterizes strength. It's a portrait of elegance and beauty, but also of pride and outward appearance. So the king is attracted to elegance, but distracted by natural strength, what the New Testament calls the flesh. The flesh is man's orientation outside of the will of God. Paul says, "I know that in me, that is, in my flesh, dwells no good thing." So when Paul talks about the flesh, he's referring to the tendency in our nature towards self-gratifying behavior. Self-gratifying behavior. Listen up now. Self-gratifying behavior. So the king is looking upon the Shulamite. He sees that she has so much beauty about her, but there is a pursuit of the things of God that are actually self-gratifying behavior. Think about that in relation to you. There is no taming of the flesh. The flesh is the flesh is the flesh. Instead, your flesh must be overcome by the Spirit, for if you walk in the Spirit, you shall not fulfill the lusts of the flesh. To control the strength or pride or neck of the horse, we use a bridle. I love riding horses, and to control the horse, you'll put a bridle on it to walk it around, or to hold it with the reins and that are attached to the bit of the horse, and through the bridle you will control the horse. That's what we do to control a horse. But the king doesn't highlight the bridle. A bridle can, in some situations, be adorned with gold and jewels, but the king doesn't highlight the bridle. He doesn't highlight the bridle as if we need to harness the flesh and keep it at bay. Instead, he highlights the jewels that were across the cheek, the jewels that were across the gold that was across the head, the silver that was embedded in there. So he says, we will make you chains of gold and silver and jewels for your cheeks. The unadorned neck, the neck that doesn't have the jewels, the neck that doesn't have the gold, the unadorned neck is an independent neck, arched in pride. And that might be fitting for a horse, but it's not fitting for a man or a woman, and certainly not for a man or a woman of God. Now, to overcome the flesh, God gives us his nature, the Spirit. He gives us his nature, deity. He gives us his nature epitomized by chains of gold, because gold is a type of deity. And then he gives us redemption, which is typified by the studs of silver. And then he gives to us the gifts of the Spirit, and they are the jewels. He's intending for us to receive and to operate the gifts of the Spirit of God. So in this way, beauty is not in outward adornment, fleshly adornment, so much as in the things that God gives to us, which reside deep within our Christ nature, the nature that Christ gives to us when we are born again. And so Peter talks about it not being in outward adornment or the braiding of hair, but through the hidden man of the heart. That is where our beauty, true beauty, lies. So love always corresponds with beauty. Acknowledging the lordship of Jesus and having faith in his redemption releases the Godhead to bestow chains of gold or the divine nature upon you that will impart such poise that your walk in the Spirit will be holy, graceful, or in a word, elegant. I'm going to repeat that because that's where we'll finish today. And this is what this whole passage is talking about. Acknowledging the lordship of Jesus and having faith in his redemption releases the Godhead to bestow chains of gold or the divine nature upon you that will impart such poise that your walk in the Spirit will be holy, graceful, or in a word, elegant. And there's the wisdom of love from the Song of Songs for you today. God bless you. We'll see you again tomorrow for some more wisdom out of this beautiful song.